we can go right into the process.
Sure. So I said a little bit about this earlier, but this coffee comes from a small importer named Osito Coffee, Osito. It's run by some very established coffee entrepreneurs. They brought in this coffee from Burundi from a something called the Long Miles Project, which we have the logo on the bag here, right next to our climate neutral certified sticker. The Long Miles Project has found a way, an innovative way to pay the coffee farming community in Burundi more for their high quality coffee. There's a weird system that was intended, that was designed as a way to fight corruption in Burundi, where they don't allow by law farmers to receive more than a set ceiling price for their coffee cherry and coffee beans. So there's a maximum price that coffee farmers can receive regardless of quality. So what the Long Miles Project does is it says, okay, we're going to charge our customers a premium on top of that price. That can't go directly to farmers by law in Burundi, but what they can do is invest that premium into a fund that is used for into a nonprofit, the Long Miles Coffee Project, that then those funds are invested in the community to build schools, to build hospitals, build roads, infrastructure, things that improve the lives of the greater coffee farming community. So it's a sort of innovative way that this organization has found to get more money into the community from sales of very high quality coffee and circumvent this kind of arcane rule that doesn't allow coffee farmers to be paid a high price per pound. So this coffee comes from the Gatukuza, that's Gatukuza, washing station, and it is a very traceable lot. It's Gatukuza lot number 28. So that means that all the lots that go through the Gatukuza washing station, they keep track of. So that's one thing we really like about working with Osito is all the coffees we get from them are highly traceable. We can trace them back to a very specific farmer or group of farmers, and even a particular lot that went through this washing station, which is a blend of multiple smallholder farms in one region. So knowing which lot from the washing station you're getting can kind of result in different nuanced flavor notes from individual lots. And we roasted this at a very light roast level to preserve a lot of the really fruity acidity that's naturally present in the coffee. I get some flavors of, like, raspberry and tropical fruit from this coffee with a nice kind of milk chocolate body. So I think without further ado, I'd love to get into brewing if that's okay with everyone else.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So I find that these cones, you can brew up to 50 grams, but I really find that we get the best tasting coffee with 30, 35 gram brews. So we're doing 30 grams today. I always use a scale when I'm making a pour over coffee, and that's so I can do a precise ratio of grounds to water. Generally, in the third wave coffee industry, a kind of happy medium is a 1:16 ratio. It's going to give you coffee that's not too strong and definitely not watered down tasting. So whatever the amount of coffee I'm putting in, I want to multiply that by 16, and that's the number of grams of water I want to use to brew that coffee. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in, 30 grams. The first thing I'm going to do is make a small well in the middle of my coffee bed. Use a spoon. If you're at home, it's just you. You can use your finger. So you want kind of like an inverted cone depression in the coffee bed. Then I'm going to tear out my scale so it reads 0. Give me 1 second. Let me grab my kettle. So point number 1 I want to make, there's a lot of talk in the coffee industry about the perfect brew temperature. In my opinion, for the light roast coffee, that brew temperature is as hot as possible. For some reason, this number 202 has become like a widely used standard in the coffee industry. I don't see any evidence for why using 202 is better than using 210. My thought is you want the brew slurry to achieve the highest peak temperature possible. So if I put on 210 water, the brew slurry will get up to 202 because there's cold coffee grounds in there now. So I always use water that's as hot as possible, 208 to 212. When I start the pour, I'm also going to start a timer, which is built into this scale. I'm shooting for about a 4-minute 30 to 5-minute total brew time. And that kind of longer brew time is good for the light roasts, which take a little bit longer to extract. So when I start pouring, I'm going to do so with as vertical a stream as possible, right in the center. And I'm going to do concentric circles out to the edge and then back to the center. And I'm going to pour on about 90 grams of water to begin with. Basically, 3 times the weight of the coffee grounds to start. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start right in the center, hit my timer, start right in the center, slow circles, using my elbow and not my wrist, rotating in one horizontal plane, coming back to the center, and then stop. Went a little heavy with the water, got to 129 grams, but that's totally fine. And then I like to give this a little spin. Really get the coffee grounds to kind of break up and get pushed up against the side of the cone. And that's going to guarantee that all the coffee grounds are evenly saturated. If you have bubbles still emerging from the coffee bed after your first pour, that's an indication that there's still dry grounds in your coffee bed. And you want to do whatever you can to eliminate that as quickly as possible. Another thing you can do is just stir with a spoon. If you don't feel comfortable doing the spin, either way is really effective. So then I'm going to get all the coffee grounds off of my spoon with my next pour and just do the same thing. Pour from about 6 inches above, start in the center, concentric circles toward the outside. Don't actually hit the outside. And then come back to the center, concentric circles, and stop. And now I'm up to about 250 grams of water. Now I'm going to give this a stir with my spoon, just kind of back and forth, back and forth. You can't stir too much, in my opinion. All this agitation has the effect of increasing how much stuff we can extract out of this coffee. The best tasting coffee has the most stuff extracted out of the coffee bed, especially with a pour over. There's almost no risk of what's called over extraction with a pour over coffee. You really only get into over extraction when you're brewing in a pressurized environment, i.e. espresso. With pour over coffee, you want to do as much as you can to extract the most stuff out of that dry coffee as possible, and that's going to give you the best possible tasting coffee. So I'm going to wait till the water level is down almost to the surface of the grounds before I pour again. I want water going through the coffee bed and not through the walls of the filter. So if you can, I think you can kind of see I'm almost to dry now. And that's when I want to pour again. I'm at 250, so I'm going to go up to 350 now. My brew time is about 245, so I'm right on track. And again, pouring in concentric circles from about 6 inches above. One other point to make, if you're whipping around with this kettle to the point that the stream is bending one way and the other, that means you're going too fast. You're going in too fast of circles. When the stream goes one way and the other, it wants to hit the wall of the cone and not the bed of the coffee. We want that stream going vertical, so it's digging up those coffee grounds and agitating them and extracting them and getting the most stuff out of our premium coffee as possible. I'm already starting to get some really nice kind of like fruity flavors, a little bit of red fruit. I can tell that there's a vibrant acidity going on in this coffee just by kind of the aroma that I'm getting. This one, again, more bright and fruity, more enzymatic, less like dark chocolate, which would be more like our bold and comforting, or to an extent also our balanced and sweet lines. With the bright and fruity, we really try to preserve as much acidity, as much fruit quality and enzymatic sweetness as possible. All right, so coming down a little lower, I'm going to do my last pour. And so I started with 30 grams. 30 times 16 is 480. So on my last pour, I'm going to stop when I reach 480 grams. Start in the center, vertical stream, slow circles using my elbow and not my wrist. Never hitting the wall of the cone, always hitting directly down into the bed. 460, 470, 480. I'm going to give this one last stir. And it looks like I'm going to overshoot my brew time by just a little bit. And that's totally okay. If you wanted to shorten your brew time, like let's say you tasted this coffee and it tasted a little bit like flat or not as bright and fruity as you were hoping. One way to fix that would be to shorten the brew time slightly. Shorter brew time, more acidity, more brightness, more slight sourness sometimes if you don't get a full extraction of the coffee. Longer brew time, generally, heavier coffee. Sometimes it can flatten it out a little bit. So what I could do to speed up this pour over would just be to grind 1 or 2 clicks coarser on my grinder. That makes the grounds more like gravel, less like sand, so water is going to flow through faster. The trade-off is less surface area means a little bit less extraction. So I'm kind of okay with this taking a fairly long time, especially because it's one of our lighter roasts. And I know that it's going to benefit from that long extraction time and really to get the most out of those coffee grounds. Any questions up till now from the audience, from our guest?
Yeah, one question, Ruben, regarding the spoon. Some people might say use a wooden spoon, metal spoon. Do you have any preference?
Yeah, I think ideally, I just don't have a small wooden spoon, but I think if I did, that's what I would use. Because again, wood is going to absorb less heat from that it's going to suck out of this bed by heating up itself than a metal would. So you really just, all your decisions are made to keep as much heat and extractability like in that coffee as possible. So temperature gives you more extraction. Agitation gives you more extraction. Surface area, finer grind gives you more extraction. Even flow through the bed, which we get by stirring and kind of spinning, gives you more extraction. An even grind particle size from a burr grinder, more extraction. All these things we're doing to benefit our final flavor in the coffee. And the spoon, it's probably a small factor, like a metal spoon is totally fine, but best case scenario, we would have a wooden or even like a non-BPA plastic spoon that's going to absorb as little heat as possible.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so your ideal total brew time was what, about, you want it to be around 5 to 6 minutes?
Yeah, I was shooting for about 5 minutes. I got a little bit of what I call stalling in this pour over, and that's like a common thing that can happen. I think if we were going to do this one over again, I would probably go 1 or 2 clicks coarser on my grinder. But let's go ahead and just taste this. See how it turned out. I actually ended up pulling it at about 7 minutes. So there's a little bit of water left in there, but I know that it's starting to choke and really slow down. So it's okay. Like once you poured on all the water, if you notice that the pour over is really stalling and slowing down to like a very slow drip, it's okay to pull that and just drink the coffee that was able to brew. Stalling will create some astringency in the cup, kind of a dry finish that some people find undesirable. So
right.
I like to pour just a little bit in my cup so I can cool it down. You taste coffee, especially light roast single origins, more the cooler they are. Kind of opens up, kind of like a wine. So I like to get like down to way under boiling before I take the first sip, so I taste as much as possible. Oh yeah, loads of like tart red fruit, raspberry, a little bit of like plum skin, Concord grape, really kind of like a mouth-watering acidity that hits you on right away, and then kind of finishing with a little bit of like a milk chocolate cocoa. But I will say that the chocolate is really not the feature of this coffee. It's much more these very fruit-forward, bright and fruity flavors: stone fruit, plum, grape, raspberry, blackberry. It's all there.
That's great. I'm ready to get some coffee right now. But you brought up some flavor profiles, and you talked about wine, so I think this is a great opportunity to get over to Alex here. And maybe, Alex, you can bring things together for us and talk about what you're doing with and that
Yeah, definitely. I mean, before we had this seminar, I already saw a ton of similarities between our industries, but I have so many more now after watching Ruben do that demonstration, which is awesome, and especially hearing him give the tasting notes on the coffee the way I would normally give tasting notes on wine was pretty cool to see. But yeah, just to sort of recap the background of Protector Cellars, we're the world's first climate positive winery, or carbon negative, I know is the kind of the term that you guys use, but basically meaning that we remove more greenhouse gases from the atmosphere than we emit in the entirety of our process. So I don't know, this is the wine. It's in a can, which is probably the most obvious difference from what somebody might expect when you say wine. The main reason that we put the wine in a can is because cans have a much lower carbon footprint than glass bottles. So that's just sort of a little background. I don't want to talk too much about just wine, but I'd love to sort of bring some of those similarities in and ask Ruben some questions. I mean, the first one that after watching you go through the pour over, when we're in the winery, oftentimes we filter wine before bottling or canning to remove some, very, very tiny particles. And one method of filtration is actually going through paper filters. Mm-hmm. And so to prepare the filter, we'll be flushing the filter with water, basically to soak there's two main reasons you want to soak the filter, so it doesn't just soak up a bunch of wine, and you don't lose a bunch of wine in the process of filtration, but also there could be like a papery flavor in the filter that you don't want to get into your wine. And I've heard in the past that if you're doing a pour over with a paper filter, to wet the filter before you do your pour over. I noticed you didn't do that, so just Correct. Wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I've thought a lot about this, and one kind of slightly unfortunate thing I think about the specialty coffee industry is a lot of people, I don't know if I call it unfortunate, but it is a characteristic. A lot of people are doing things because they saw someone else do it, or because they heard it's the right thing to do, but they don't really have an experiential basis for why they're doing that thing. And I've actually gone and made, like, I wanted to test this maybe a year or two ago, like, does rinsing the paper filter matter? So I did pretty extensive testing myself where I just brewed a filter. So I took a filter with no coffee in it, poured on, brewed that filter as if I were doing a pour over coffee and reserved the water, then poured just the water itself into a different thing and did blind taste tests of the two. And I could not tell a difference whatsoever in the flavor of the filtered water, or that had been through the paper, or mm-hmm. the water that had not been through the paper. The other thing I noticed is that rinsed filters seem to choke more. I know we got a little bit of choking in that last one, so I'm not like, the evidence is contrary to what I'm saying, but I've noticed that rinsed filters tend to choke a little bit more often than unrinsed filters. And I feel like the flavor difference of a choked pour over and a non-choked pour over is much greater than the imperceptible difference between water run through a paper filter versus not. So because I can't taste any flavor even in just water run through a paper, I'm never going to taste a papery flavor in coffee. Now, using much larger filters that might be required for wine, or maybe different kinds of filters, I'm very possible that you could
Yeah.
taste something there.
No, that totally makes sense. I mean, these are much thicker filters, and we're running it through literally 40 filter pads.
Yeah.
And you can basically you'll put your mouth or your hand at the end of the line when you're flushing it with water, and you can taste the papery flavor.
Yeah.
But yes, it totally
Yeah.
makes sense that we have so much more paper that it's going through basically
Right.
than what
So
you're using.
one brew method that's a pour over method that's pretty common is Chemex. I know Chemex use much thicker filters than V60s. May be worthwhile to rinse a Chemex, but I would advise never to use Chemex, to be honest, because I think that Chemex is on average, you're going to get far less extraction from your coffee using a Chemex. And that's really just the whole story with pour over coffee is like, how much can you extract out of those grounds? More, you're going to get better coffee. And Chemex, I find that I get like 18, 19% extractions on average, whereas V60 is about 22% total weight of the coffee extracted into the water.
So I guess just talking about other methods for pour overs and kind of dovetailing with our focus on sustainability. Maybe a year or two ago, I got a stainless steel pour over cone, basically. The idea being that you could get rid of the paper filter. So I was thinking less waste. Have you ever used that, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have used the steel cones. I find that they don't filter as much as a paper filter. You get a coffee much more similar to, like, you still get some of the oils that are present in a French press. It's a little bit of like a heavier cup, I find. But everything really is like, a slight trade-off, right? It's like in the trade-off of not having to use paper and just having one thing that you can wash is very worth it for a lot of people. I'm always kind of chasing like the absolute best coffee quality from a given coffee. So I find that V60s with paper filters give me the coffee that I prefer most of the time. And I find that also that the metal filters also will choke more often because it's just a bunch of little tiny holes. Right. Each one of those little tiny holes can get a little particle of coffee just blocking it entirely. So you can get more erratic brews, I find, with with a metal cone. You'll do the same grind setting, same amount of water, etc., but your brew times will be more variable than they will with a paper filter. So I'm always looking for the thing that gives me the best coffee the most consistently. And this is the method that I prefer, but definitely if you found something that works for you and it's it is using less fibers, it's not using paper, and those are all really positive things.
Yeah, so that was my main thing with it, but obviously I'm not coming from the side of what the potential quality trade-off is. So it's interesting to hear that, for protector cellars, the whole idea is how can we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in every step of the process without negatively affecting wine quality. That's the key, is like, right. Ultimately this it's a wine, and for you it's a coffee, right? So it still has to be the best possible product.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting idea, and certainly to your point, over about a year and a half, the stainless steel filter did clog up quite a bit. So now it brews a much slower, I get a lot more choking in it.
Right. Right.
So
And
Alex,
the analog might be, if you thought about replacing those paper filters that you use for the wine with steel, it might not perform the way that you want it to for your wine quality. So that's kind of where my head's at with the coffee, I think.
Yeah, I don't honestly, I don't know that you could possibly get a fine enough steel mesh for wine.
Yeah.
There are other ways. There's actually a more common way now is it's basically going through a stone.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and I think that's the way a lot of the industry is going, and I think maybe from a sustainability perspective, it's also the
Yeah.
better choice.
I mean, on the plus side, these are, unbleached, and totally like compostable. So, the coffee with the filter can just be thrown directly into your home compost. And coffee grounds make fantastic composting material. And you have to have the right mix of what's called green and brown material. Green being coffee grounds, even though it's actually brown. But green just means actual plant matter. And then brown meaning like things like cardboard, paper. You have to have a kind of an even balance of the two. So you're getting, when you throw a paper filter with coffee in it into the compost, you're getting some of both and keeping your compost. Probably still you're getting more green. You'd have to add like another piece of cardboard or something to really balance it out, but you're getting more of a balance.
So Alex, question for you.
Shoot.
What would you see as the greatest misconception people have about drinking wine out of a can? And because I would say that that's the one thing, if people could see that as a benefit versus a detriment to great quality wine, people would be really excited about the approach that you've taken.
Yeah, I think the greatest misconception is probably that it's automatically, if it's in a can, it's low quality wine. And I think that there's a lot of reason to have that misperception, because there's over the last few years, the canned wine industry has become a lot bigger, and it's mostly driven by some really large production, low quality producers. Sort of like the Bud Lights of the Budweisers of the and Coors of the wine industry. And clearly there's a place for that, because a lot of people are drinking Bud and Coors. But if you're somebody who is into wine and wants a good quality wine, and you've had a low quality wine from a can, which is probably 80 to 90% of canned wines out there, then there's good reason that you would be skeptical. But I think ultimately the can is the vessel, and for us that's just an additional hurdle to get over. It's not because we decided we're going to put lower quality wine in there, or somehow it becomes lower quality once it goes in there. In fact, there's a few things about a can that can actually keep a wine at a higher quality than in a bottle, where the biggest thing in a bottle is that you get light damage, which can change the flavors of a wine pretty quickly, which you don't get in a can. Obviously, no light is getting into the wine. And the second thing is potentially for wines with a cork finish, you can get damage from the cork, from microbiology that's in the cork. I'm sure most people have heard of a corked wine. You can't get that in a can. Obviously, you can't get that in a screw top wine either. But yeah, I think that's the hardest thing to get over, is that just because it's in a can, that's not an indication of the quality of the wine that's inside.
Got it. So there's really no way that your wine in the can actually is affecting or negatively affecting the high quality of your.
No, no, not at all. The one thing I would say to that point is that, you know, if I were making a wine that I wanted to age for 10 years or 20 years, then I wouldn't put it in a can. You know, the life of any beverage in a can is more limited. It's about 2 years. But when we look at the statistics of wine drinking, it's something like 98% of wine is consumed within a week of when it's purchased. So, you know, for those great wines that you're saving for your birthday or your anniversary or whatever special night, yeah, you know, don't drink that out of a can. If it's 20 years old and it's in a can, it's probably not going to be good. Just like your 20-year-old Coke from a can is not going to be good. But if you're going to the store to buy a wine to drink tonight or next week or next month, then yeah, it's going to be just as good from a can.
And your carbon footprint related to that wine would be dramatic.
Much lower. Yeah. The carbon footprint from just producing the cans. So this can, this is 1/3 of a bottle of wine. So to produce 3 cans, which is the equivalent of 1 bottle of wine, the carbon footprint is still 1/3 of the glass bottle. Not to mention the fact that this is made of 70% recycled materials. Aluminum is the most valuable material in the waste stream, so it's recycled at the highest rate. You know, it's recycled at 70% versus about 20% for glass, and you have 70% recycled material in here versus about 20% for glass. No surprise that they're about the same. Yeah, from a sustainability perspective, much lower emissions, much better recycling rate. Excuse me. So it's sort of a no-brainer on that level. It's just to your first point, it's a perception issue.
Got it. Well, that's helpful too, and especially to know that within 2 years of a purchase of a can of wine, there's no concern. You shouldn't have any concern about how it would affect the quality of the wine.
No.
People don't know that either. So of the wines that you have now, which one are you most excited about at the moment of your wine?
That's always the toughest question. That's like, hey, HG, which of your kids right now is your favorite kid?
I got an answer for you right now after last night. There's no question. But I guess take us through a couple scenarios where you'd recommend your wine so people know when they see it which one to go for.
Yeah, I mean, well, I have a white wine, which is a Sauvignon Blanc. I have a rosé, and then I have a red wine, which is a Cabernet Sauvignon. And so, you know, yes, to your point there, you always know at any given moment in time, you might have a favorite, but that could change. So I think, yeah, at this moment, the Cabernet is my favorite. I drank it last night with my meatless Monday pasta dish, which I, you know, also just sort of from a sustainability perspective, trying to do a little less meat in the diet. And I think that, yeah, this Cabernet, all the wines are from Paso Robles, which is an area on the central coast of California. And it's known for producing high quality, particularly Rhone and Bordeaux varieties. So Bordeaux varieties meaning mainly Cabernet and Merlot, and there's a little bit of Merlot in this wine. So yeah, I mean, honestly, you know, when people think of a canned wine, again, just sort of going to the perception issue, a lot of the idea is drinking something outdoors, whether it's at the beach or the pool, or on the golf course or whatever. So the white or the red or the rosé seem like they come to mind first, but I think the red for me, at least at this moment, you know, that's the one that shines as well.
Nice. Yeah, I can see, especially now when we're wanting to be outside and a lot of meetings are taking place in park, the ability to, if I'm carrying a, and how does it come in a package? Do you package it in a six pack? So it's like two bottles of wine and, um,
It's in a 4 pack, so it's, yeah, 1 1/3 bottles of wine basically. But most retailers, I think, will just sell them individually. So if you just pick up one for yourself to go hang out at the park, maybe your friend is not as refined and they're drinking White Claw and you're drinking your wine, then
do you feel that it makes a difference to pour it out of the can into a glass just to bring out the flavor of the wine?
yeah, it definitely does. When I'm at home and I'm drinking it, I always pour it into a glass. If I'm going out to the park to have a picnic, then I'm drinking it from the can. But certainly, just the same way that Ruben is swirling around his coffee to kind of get those aromas and those flavors to pop, you're not going to be able to get that to the same extent drinking from a can with a relatively small opening. Versus putting it in a glass and letting the wine open up. But again, like Ruben said, there's a trade-off with everything. If you want to bring it outside and you have that convenience factor, it still tastes great from the can. You just might not get the same degree of flavor components. But then you don't have to bring your glass outside.
Nice. Well, it has been great to have you join us and talk. Come back anytime to talk more with us and compare flavor notes. That was a lot of fun. I'm gonna put in the chat just so people can have it flash on the screen here your website, so people can go there and check out more about your wine. Looking forward to having it on our next AEG corporate picnic and just getting some wine and coffee out in the park. I was recently at Bryant Park and it turned out to be a great venue for an outdoor meeting. People could be spread out around a circle of chairs, and I could just see both coffee and wine being a great addition. Ruben, we're going to take it back to you to close things out. If you could just provide a summary of the kind of 3 to 4 most important things to remember in a pour over to head people out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say number one, use a scale and the right ratio of coffee to water. I use a 1 to 16 ratio. So whatever my weight of coffee grounds, multiply by 16. That's how much water I want to use to brew that coffee. Number two, brew with water that is as hot as possible. I generally set my kettle to 208 and let it get up to somewhere between 208 and 212. Number three, when you pour, do so slowly in concentric circles with a vertical stream so that you're getting as deep into that coffee bed and moving the grounds around as possible. Number four, I would say just, like either spin or stir your coffee bed after every pour. And I think if you follow all those 4 points, you're going to get great tasting coffee every time.
Nice. Well, we're looking forward to trying that. My everything is improved with my French press based on our last master class. So looking
Oh,
forward
that's great.
to doing the pour over. Thank you both so much. Enjoy your Tuesday. We've got coffee and wine on the agenda for later. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.